Hi everybody, and thanks for coming to the webinar today. I'm Catherine Bradley. I'm a senior consultant at the Audience Agency. And in this session, I'll be taking you through how to create an audience development plan. Just to describe myself, so I am a white female in my 40s. I have glasses and sort of shortish fair hair. So the focus of the session is very much kind of taking you through a structure to work with and highlighting many of the things to consider really in pulling your audience development plan together. As Adam says, we'll send out slides after the session, and these include quite a few concepts to take on board, as well as lots of links to further resources as well. So we're kind of taking you through quite a bit today, but hopefully gives you that kind of structure to then take forward into your audience development planning process. So just to start briefly by introducing us and who we are. The Audience Agency is a not-for-profit charity. We work in the UK and internationally. And really underpinning our work is a collaborative principle of sharing data and knowledge about audiences, where we run Audience Finder, the national data and development tool for the sector, and hold the national cultural data sets. And our bespoke work includes formative research, or audience development planning, and consultancy supporting audience-centered innovation and change. So I'm going to start by considering for a few minutes, what is audience development? It's widely defined as a process to increase or to change for the better the numbers of people engaging, the diversity of audiences, and the depth or scope of people's engagement. Looking at the Audience Agency definition, audience development is a planned, organisation-wide approach to extending the range and nature of relationships with the public by focusing on their needs. It helps a cultural organisation to achieve its social purpose, financial sustainability, and creative ambitions. There are lots of other kind of definitions out there too. These often tend to have a common thread, and that is that audiences are at the heart of planned decision making across the whole organisation. And just to be clear, we're using audiences as a term very much in its broadest sense here. So to include those who engage with an organisation in person, online, as an audience member, a visitor, a participant, a community member, or other type of stakeholder. So broadly, there are three ways that you can develop your audiences. The first of those is more. So that's about more of the same type of audience. So essentially increasing footfall and numbers. Then the second is broader reach. So that's reaching new types of people. So people who are different to those who your organisation is engaging at the moment. And then thirdly, deeper engagement, and that's with existing audiences. So encouraging them to do more with you, such as visit more often, engage with different offers, or perhaps donate or become an advocate for your organisation. And your audience development plan may well involve all of these in consideration of different types of audience and your different strategic priorities. Cultural organisations are always in the position of balancing priorities across the artistic and cultural, financial and social. And it's a kind of quite unique triple bottom line that we see in the cultural sector. And audiences are really at the heart of success across all of these three areas. So your artistic or cultural ambitions are the heart of what you do and your purpose. And ultimately, it's about engaging people with these. Social objectives around reaching people are determined internally and may be influenced by funders or other stakeholders. And audiences are at the centre of bringing income into an organisation, whether that's directly through ticket sales, through ancillary spend, such as in your shop or your cafe, as well as indirectly, so for example, through initiatives to reach new audiences that might open up access to funding streams. And taking a strategic approach to audience development planning helps to see how engaging different types of audience can support delivery of the different priorities within your organisation. So spanning priorities of funders and other stakeholders and internal priorities across departments, as well as helping to break down potential or perceived conflicts between different priority areas across your organisation. So this is the broad audience development planning process we're following during this session. And as I said, this is supported by a wide range of resources. We've got links throughout the presentation as well as at the end, so you'll be able to take a look at those when we send the slides out later. One important thing to sort of start with really is to say that audience development requires an investment of time from your organisation. But this is very much a flexible process, and you can follow and adapt this to meet your own needs. And what's really key to success is that the process is informed by real evidence and includes space and time for reflective learning as part of the continual cycle of improvement and change. So let's consider for a moment why you need an audience development plan. So this Terry Pratchett quote really sums up the importance of planning for the future, that's rooted back to your organisation's core purpose and an understanding of the current situation you're in. If you do not know where you come from, then you don't know where you are. And if you don't know where you are, then you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going wrong. So what are the features of effective audience development planning? Well, first of all, within the sector, we know that targeted activities often occur as part of a funded project or result from the focus of specific teams or areas of service delivery. But effective audience development planning is an ongoing and inclusive strategy for change that helps you to move away from focusing on projects or on campaigns. It's mission-led, and it helps to balance your priorities in different areas of organisational development. So supporting delivery on your social purpose, financial sustainability, and creative or curatorial practice and ambitions there. It's also empowering, as it helps you to say no when activity doesn't support that mission. Delivery within organisations can often be fragmented across different teams, and good audience development planning is organisation-wide and integrates departments and operations across your organisation to move towards common goals. It uses evidence, not assumptions, to inform decision-making. And it addresses how to use different strategies to engage different sorts of audiences, encompassing both existing and new audiences. Users should be consulted and involved, placing audiences and understanding of their needs at the centre of the process. And it helps you to make best use of the often limited resources available to target activity at the people you really want to reach. And lastly, it's about long-term relationships and development. So a continuous process of review, ensuring continuing relevance. It also supports a measured response to the unexpected. So there are lots of different ways to create an audience development plan. And the main thing is that it must work for your organisation and be a useful tool that helps you in your work. It needs to help you to understand the impact of any changes you put in place and help you reflect on your progress. So it gives you the ability to track that progress and reflect on it and adjust things that aren't working quite as you want to, as well as celebrate your successes. I'm going to move on now to think about your mission, purpose, and goals of your organisation. So identifying your purpose is often one of the hardest things to do, and different people within an organisation or a team might have different perspectives on that, and that might depend on their understanding of priorities, thinking back to that triple bottom line. But it's also really crucial to any strategic planning. Going through a robust thing to defining your purpose can be empowering, essentially, and going through that process, a robust process to do that, can be empowering. It allows you to question whether something you're being asked to do or want to do yourself will genuinely contribute to the delivery of your overall purpose and how it will do that. And it also supports a targeted use of resources. You're less likely to use time and money on ad hoc projects that have no long-term impacts or legacy in terms of developing your organisation. And once you define your purpose, think about devising the audience goals that support against delivery of that. So audience goals are concerned with translating the higher aims and ambitions of the organisation into broad audience goals. So these set out your overall aims and goals for audience development. They should be aligned with top-level business objectives. And there'll probably be a combination of financial, of social, of educational or experiential, and reputational or creative goals as well. So some examples there of how that might work in practice on the screen. For example, you might have an overall aim to be inclusive. That might translate into audience goals such as we listen to and learn from local communities, or we are a place where everyone feels welcome, whoever they are. You might have an overall aim to be financially resilient, and that might translate into audience goals such as we maximise income from those that can afford it. I'm going to look now at a really important phase of the audience development planning process, and that is analysis and understanding of the current situation in which your organisation finds itself. So, where are you starting from? Analysis of your current situation really helps to ensure informed development and really kind of gives you something solid to sort of ground your audience development plan in. And one really critical area to include in an analysis of your current situation is your current audiences. So understanding who engages with you and where they come from, which parts of your organisation do they engage with, what offers do they engage with, and how often, for example. In order to get this understanding, you can use insight from a really wide range of sources. That might include an audience survey, a ticketing system, things like participation records, digital analytics. And you can use these to set benchmarks for your current audience engagement. And that might be across your in-person, digital and participatory audiences as appropriate. One of the most useful ways of combining your findings is to create a clear segmentation, and that's using insight to group people by distinct needs that you can respond to as an organisation. So you might start that process by identifying the groups that are important to you and then layering up insight to build a picture of their characteristics, their needs and their values. And this can be quite an iterative process. So you can begin with a hypothesis and plan to add evidence to that over time as you gather more data and information. For example, you might identify groups such as infrequent attenders for large-scale events who travel more than 45 minutes, and then look to add your understanding of that group over time as you gather more data and evidence. You might have regularly attending families, perhaps visiting two or more times a year. They might be interested in participatory activities, live within 5 miles of your venue, and perhaps tend to be in the audience spectrum group trips and treats. So hopefully you can see here how sort of layering data can help you to group and understand people in a meaningful way. So when you're thinking about segmentation, there's a few points here that will really help to ensure that your segments are fit for purpose. The first is, do you have the evidence and know enough about them? And really key here is making sure that you're using real evidence and not assumptions. It's very easy to make assumptions about the people who are engaging with your organisation, but ensuring real evidence can bring a whole new level of understanding. Are there enough of these people to make your activities worthwhile? You want to make sure you've got a big enough group, one that's worthy of considering as a group to target. Really importantly, are they reachable? Do you know where to find them and how to communicate with them? So again, drawing evidence together to ensure that you have that that picture of where people live, and the tools and messages that are going to be effective in reaching them. And are they homogeneous? So do they share enough of the same characteristics to be targeted with the same activities and messages? And we know that this is really important in terms of ensuring that people are engaged with what you do, that they don't switch off to your communications, for example, because they perceive them as not relevant. And there are links at the end to further resources supporting segmentation, so to help with some of this. So a segmentation of your audience is not the same as a segmentation of the population, like Audience Spectrum, though you can use it and tools like it to understand your own audience groups. And just moving on now, let's take a look at Audience Spectrum. Many of you may well be familiar with this. For those of you that aren't, Audience Spectrum segments the UK population on the basis of their engagement with and attitudes towards arts and culture. It's really highly geolocatable, so each UK household has a segment assigned, and it's based on a very wide range of data sources. So that includes the National Depth Survey taking part, cultural proximity indices, which look at where people live in relation to cultural offers, demographics from census data, as well as wider consumer data from Experian. And as well as that, the Audience Finder data set, so real data about audiences and audience engagement from the last few years. There are 10 segments in total. You can see those on the screen here. 3 are highly engaged with culture. They're the 3 in orange. 3 have more medium or occasional engagement. They're shown in green. And 4 are less engaged. And these 4 are, in many cases, the focus for outreach work. We've also had 20 new subsegments, and these break down each of the 10 groups into 2 subsegments. I haven't shown those on the screen, but there is a link here to all the pen portraits on our website. So do take a look at those if you haven't, and you can see how the new subsegments provide a greater layer of understanding within each of those groups as well. And just to say overall, within each of these broad, high, medium and low engaged bands, each group demonstrates differences in behaviour around arts and culture, around their preferences, and in terms of the opportunities to engage them, their needs and the barriers to engagement as well. And you can determine how many in your audience your own audience fall into each audience spectrum segment with full postcodes or household data from your survey and booking systems. You'll know that if you use Audience Finder, that this is included in your dashboards, and you can also request bespoke audience spectrum analysis outside of Audience Finder. So please just get in touch directly if that might be something you're interested in. I'm not going to explore audience spectrum in any more depth now, but there's a wide range of resources to support you to use audience spectrum, including the detailed pen portraits that I've just mentioned, and that they allow you to understand the needs, preferences, attitudes, behaviour and barriers of each of those groups. Quite detailed, so it's worth spending a little bit of time kind of exploring all that information if you haven't done so. So going back to the situational analysis phase of audience development planning, other areas to explore include your current service or programme offer, establishing there what you do for different types of audiences and what's working well and for whom, as well as what's not working so well at the moment. Also looking at current marketing activities and their effectiveness. So putting tracking in place where you're able to for these is really important. So looking at your existing channels and messages and where you have this information already, their reach, effectiveness and return on investments. The more you can gather in this, the more you can be savvy with your resource allocation in the future. And where you don't yet have the evidence you need to fully understand your current situation, look to set audience goals that focus on addressing this. So place a real focus on that within your plan as something that's kind of quite core to delivery, and that can help to make sure that that really gets addressed throughout the next year or two, whatever's relevant in terms of time frame there. So moving on from your starting point now into where you want to be. So one important step here is to kind of set out the audiences you want to reach and why. So linking that back to your mission and goals, establish who you're getting at the moment, and actually who it is you want to be reaching as an organization to link back into those core aims and goals there. Establishing what your target audiences are looking for and how you will reach them. So there's a wide range of insights here available to explore what the population looks like in your catchment. This can be compared to your current audiences to identify where the scope for development and direction around the kind of broader, deeper or more audience engagement, or drawing back to that, harking back to that slide I presented earlier on. The types of data you can use to look at opportunities in your catchment population include area profile reports. These bring together data from Experian and the Office for National Statistics about the population in a defined area, and they cover demographics and cultural engagement. You can order those bespoke for specific areas. There's a link at the bottom of the slide here to do that. There's also regional area profile reports available for free via the Audience Finder tools. So you can look at those via the Audience Finder dashboard. So that the first link on this slide here under that second bullet point. Also on the Audience Finder Scotland site, if you're in Scotland, there's area profile reports there directly via that site. So you can access those for free at the moment at a regional level. Within the area profile reports is also audience spectrum. That's also included. So if you have an audience spectrum profile of your audiences done, you'll have a base population to compare that to within that. So you can look at how that compares to that population. There's also the mapping tool, which I'll show in just a minute, that gives you a visual picture of where those segments live within the population. Other sources you might want to consider include local authority population data, which can be really useful. And if you're in an area with significant tourism, then tourism agencies can often provide insights about who's visiting your area, about the developmental priorities for tourism in the area that you might want to consider in relation to your own priorities and goals, as well as changing tourism trends. So just to show you the audience spectrum mapping tool that I've just mentioned, you can access this through the Audience Finder dashboard. You don't have to be inputting data into Audience Finder to do that. There's a link on the slide here, so you can just follow that through. It gives a really great visual view of the number and proportion of each of the audience spectrum segments within the population at postal sector level, and you can zoom into the area, a geographical area that you're interested in, to look at that. You can see sort of how that works there on the screen. So the wider environment in which your organisation operates will directly affect your ability to engage audiences and the opportunities there are to do so. And exploring wider contextual data should therefore be an important part of your situational analysis. So this might include looking at sector and area benchmarks, for example, through any sector reporting and through Audience Finder, where you can get a picture of your the national picture for your art form, for example, that's of interest to you. And through this type of data, you can look at how your audience compares to kind of national or regional pictures and establish where there may be missed opportunities for development. Also, considering your unique selling points and positioning as part of a competitor analysis can really help to identify competitive advantages, competitive disadvantages, and collaborative opportunities as well, that might affect or support you in meeting your goals. And the competitors you might be looking at might not be other arts and cultural organisations. It might be, for example, just in the competitor mapping example shown on the screen here, you might want to consider how your offer for families, for example, sits alongside others in the area. And you can use things like competitor mapping to explore kind of relevant function, relevant attributes, and think about where your organization sits in relation to other offers, and therefore what your unique selling point might be, for example, within your local area. So it's quite a useful tool and quite adaptable, and to consider that competitive environment. There's also a range of benchmarking data available via the Audience Finder dashboard. Provides a national art form and regional context to your own findings, and can help enhance your understanding of market potential for your organisation. Understanding and keeping actively on top of changed opportunities in the light of the pandemic, in the light of the cost of living crisis, is obviously critical, and never more so than perhaps it has been over the last few years. And in addition to what your own audience analysis tells you about change behaviour, there's a range of national data available. That includes the Cultural Participation Monitor, a survey that's been operating in waves since autumn 2020, and samples the whole population, exploring physical and digital cultural engagement and intentions around cultural engagement. So the chart here is an example from the research, showing how willingness to attend cultural events in person has increased since 2020. Do take a look. There's a link on here. You can link through to kind of quite a few insights from across all the different waves, including the latest wave that took place in August that's recently been reported on there.
Okay.
And then just to give another view of the data that's available in here. The chart here shows how much people are planning to change their expenses, including on culture and leisure outside the home. Again, this is from the August 2022 wave and recently been reported. But what this is showing is that 92% plan to reduce their spend on culture and leisure outside the home, which is quite a sobering statistic. And data like this might really lead you to explore how you can help to remove financial barriers to accessing your organisation, and consider value for money across all aspects of a visit, as well as giving you the sort of tools to help to plan for some of the challenges that might be coming up in the future as well. An especially useful tool for analysing your organisation's current situation is a SWOT analysis, and I'm sure many of you have done and are familiar with the concept of a SWOT analysis. Undertaking a SWOT focused on factors specifically affecting audiences and your ability to engage and develop different types of audience can be a really useful stage in the planning process. And it works particularly well when you gain input from across your whole organisation to do that. So the SWOT explores internal strengths and weaknesses, and external opportunities and threats. And also useful for further interrogating your external environment is the PEST analysis. So this includes the political, things such as government interventions and policies, the economic, so things like disposable income amongst the population, unemployment, economic growth. Social, so things such as demographics, behaviours, cultural barriers, attitudes of the population might be included in there. And then technological, that might include innovations in technology that might affect what you do, or the opportunities available as well as technological access and awareness in your potential market too. I'd like to move on now to focus what it means to take an audience-centered view of your offer. So really putting audiences and their needs at the heart of the decision-making process and the heart of the planning process. What you offer and how you talk about it can make a really big difference to who you engage with. And a really good example of how that can work in practice is considering features, the facts about your offer, and benefits, the reasons why people will want to engage. In some cases, and for some of your audience groups, these may look really quite similar, but in others, they might be very different. For example, for some audiences, the features of an 18th century house and garden might also be the benefit to engage. They might have a specific interest in that. But for others, the benefits might be about relaxing space to escape from everyday life. And in practice, audience development means inviting people to do something. In thinking about the people you need to reach to achieve your goals, it's really good to question if you really understand how they see your organization. Just thinking back about the features and the benefits, and if you really understand what the benefits are to those audiences versus the features. What do they need and want from you? How can you invite them, and what do you need to change to reach and engage audiences? The user journey includes digital as well as physical touch points. So dig into what social media channels your target audiences use, how they find out information, how they make decisions around engaging with you. The image here is from a digital touchpoints research project we did with the National Gallery, and you can read about that later via the link on the slide here. Considering the many audience touch points across the physical and digital is incredibly useful to understand the different ways in which people interact with your organization and the impressions they get at each and what they really need from you at each stage of that engagement journey with you. You might need to be prepared to make some significant changes in order to engage some of your target groups, as well as taking on board a design thinking approach. So starting with insight and consultation to really genuinely find out about the needs of the people you want to reach. Design or co-designing new offers to meet these needs, and then testing ideas and making revisions based on feedback to ensure that you're genuinely understanding and meeting the needs of those people within your communities that you want to engage. We're going to take a 5-minute break now. So if we could come back about, if we say, we'll start again about 2:10. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you managed to grab a quick cup of tea or whatever then. So just to move on now to think about the next phase in the audience development cycle, strategic planning. So the strategies are approaches to meet your target audience goals, to deliver against those goals, and to reach your target audiences. And strategic planning should in particular consider breaking down into targeted approaches for different audiences and for specific goals. So be very specific to what you want to achieve and who you want to reach. They should consider a way to account for any inconsistencies between artistic ambitions and the potential that you've identified to engage target audiences. So to try and bridge what can sometimes be a gap there. To cover approaches to developing the experience, programming and offer in addition to communications and marketing. So it's very much about the whole holistic offer, not just about the communication of that. So some things to think about. How can you maximize the potential of your offer? What are the benefits from the audience perspective? And legacy planning, so considering areas such as audiences, advocacy, and the community. Just to show a couple of examples there on the screen about what an audience strategy might look like. So going back to that example goal earlier of listening to and learning from local communities. So a strategic approach to relate to that might be around developing a local resident panel. Going back again to the goal around maximizing revenues from those who can afford it. One of the strategies to address that might be to review the subscriber offer. There are lots of tools available to help you identify strategies, and one which we found to be particularly effective in our work at the audience agency is the Ansoff Matrix. This might be an approach you've used before. The Ansoff Matrix was originally devised in 1957 by Igor Ansoff as a strategic business development tool. And it can be a very useful way to start to break down and map out kind of what will probably be a range of perhaps complex audience development strategies across your organization into what you will do and for who. So it includes 4 main approaches based on a combination of new and existing audiences and new and existing offers. So market penetration in the bottom left corner. Now that's concerned with further expansion of current audiences with current offers. So what you know works well and is enjoyed by current audiences. And approaches here might include things like developing loyalty through membership schemes, developing volunteering, increasing secondary spend, and encouraging more frequent visits. It might also be about increasing footfall and income for your organisation through reaching more of the same types of audience by promoting your offer in areas where they're concentrated. So knowing, for example, you've got an audience for whatever you're doing and just trying to look for more of the same types of people. Market development in the top left is about presenting your current offer in a way that will attract new types of visitor. And the approach here is really focused on engaging more and different people with the work that you already do. So it's about taking your existing offer and thinking about how you can make that appeal to new people. That might include reaching out to new geographical areas. It might be presenting the offer in a different way or in a different location that appeals to a different type of attender. It might be around developing your welcome so you're better able to meet the needs of a new audience group. It might be around different messaging and marketing channels. So offer development in the bottom right is about creating new products and offers and experiences for current audiences. And the approach here really centers on encouraging existing audiences to do more and different things with you. That might include things like incentives to encourage people to try a new type of show, or getting current visitors to one site to visit a different site. It might be about programming new and extended events such as talks and tours or online events. So designed for your existing audience, but encouraging them to engage in a different way with your organization and what you do. So diversification in the top right is the development of new offers for new audiences. And this is really the riskiest area because it's all unknown and it tends to be resource intensive. But it's where some of the really rewarding development work can happen. And approaches might be around funded projects, which should be identified in line with your strategic goals. Perhaps an opportunity for application of a design thinking approach to develop a whole new strand of offer, such as co-created content, newly commissioned work, or a new collecting area, for example. One of the really important things in using the Ansoff Matrix is to really ensure that your strategies are balanced across these four boxes. And what you really want to avoid is everything, for example, in the diversification box. So we know that this is the riskiest area and it's the most resource intensive. So the benefit of using the Ansoff Matrix is to really ensure that you've got that balance of strategy across your organization, and that you're looking after existing audiences as well as developing new ones, and thinking about your existing offers in relation to anything new that might be developed as well. There's a few examples here. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but you can link through to these later from the slides. They're all written up as case studies on our website. So under market penetration, we've got an example there from Rambert. That's around increasing ticket yield from existing audiences. That focused around a ticket offer for a touring theatre venues friends group, where Rambert encouraged put an offer in place to encourage more sales for a quieter performance during their week at the theatre. And it resulted in overall higher sales and income. In the top left under market development, there's a case study there for Barnsley Museums about engaging audiences during the pandemic. One particular thing they did there was to maximise the appeal of their outdoor spaces, their existing outdoor spaces, to reach new people during the pandemic. In the bottom right, under offer development, there's a case study from Opera North that outlines how they went about engaging their existing audiences in a new way during the pandemic through the Opera North at Home and on-demand online streams of work. And then in the top right, under diversification, is an example from the East Durham Creates Creative People and Places project. And that looks at evidence-led and community-based creation of free family events for the frontline families audience spectrum group. How to balance in-person and online strategies, maybe something that some organisations are facing more in light of changes perhaps in the way people engage with culture during the pandemic, and the continuing importance of online cultural engagement alongside in-person engagement for many organisations. And one really critical point here is to work back from your audience goals to see where digital cultural delivery, content and communications really enable you to meet those goals, rather than doing digital for digital's sake. Testing your digital content by constantly evaluating and testing with real users is important. And whilst this applies to your physical offers too, it may be a particular consideration for digital content where you may be doing something new, and where opportunities and expectations might be evolving at a faster pace. We've put a link to an example empathy map here on the screen as well, and that can be a really useful tool to explore how your target audiences behave, both physically and digitally. So thinking holistically across both sides of your offer. So I'd like to move on now to setting objectives. So objectives define what success looks like and how you can measure it. And your objectives should ideally be SMART. And what we mean, I'm sure you've all come across that acronym before, but what we mean by that is that the goal is clearly defined and unambiguous. Measurable, so the goal uses concrete evidence to measure achievement. For example, through your audience survey, ticketing data, through other types of evaluative research that you might undertake with your audiences. The goal must be something that may be challenging, but isn't out of reach. So you want it to be achievable, and definitely challenge yourself, but you certainly don't want to be making it so out of reach that you'll set yourself up for failure. It must also be relevant. The goal must matter to your organisation and relate back to its mission and goals. And timetabled, goals need grounding within a time frame, incorporating a delivery date. And the purpose of the objectives is to really help you to understand what will success look like, and to give you that guide for how you will measure it. So how will you know what has been successful and what hasn't in terms of delivery and tracking of your audience development plan. Just thinking for a moment as well about some specific information around setting digital objectives too. Social media and website analytics can give us too much data. So really concentrating on the data which will help you to answer the questions you're asking is important here. So being clear on what your objectives are and then focusing on the data that will really help you to answer the extent to which you have met those objectives. And benchmarking can be quite key here to understanding what's working and what isn't. So what does success mean to you? Is it, for example, a target amount of people attending a live stream talk or performance? Is it enough people clicking on a link in your post to buy a ticket? Is it about building a community that talks to you? When you're setting objectives, think about if and how you can measure these and how you can act on the findings to make changes to improve in your practice. And making decisions based on your digital analytics is often an iterative process. So regularly review what is working and interrogate what isn't, and then adapt your objectives as appropriate. So lots of kind of constant sort of tracking throughout the delivery of your plan to really kind of keep a close eye on how things are going. So looking now at action planning, and this relates to what you will do and when. It's about setting out a timetabled, budgeted and resourced range of activities designed to meet objectives. The engagement mix is a useful concept to approach your action planning. It brings together the traditional 4 Ps of marketing, product, price, promotion, and place, with the 3 Cs of community engagement, community involvement, content, and co-creation, which are focused on involving people in decision-making, exploration, and dialogue. So a little bit less, so whilst the 4 Ps might be a little bit more involved with kind of what your organization must push out to people, the 3 Cs are very much focused on that, on the kind of involvement of your communities and those you want to reach. So the marketing mix, or the 4 Ps of marketing, represents the main elements in meeting people's needs to engage them with what you do. And these are fundamentally the main factors that will influence people's decisions and ability to engage with your organization. So considering across these is an important part of the process. So starting first of all with your products or your program, this should consider your whole offer. And critically, being clear about what aspects of your program are aimed at different target audiences is really important. So moving away from sort of pushing everything out to everybody so that people might switch off because it's not for them. So being really clear about what is aimed at who there. And it includes the kind of core program as well as the surrounding benefits that you might offer alongside that as well. Place is where activities take place, at what times, how people access them. It can include both physical and digital delivery, practical aspects such as booking facilities. Your staff and your welcome are an important part of this as well as aspects such as the environment and the social space, the kind of experience that creates for people engaging with your organisation. Is really important and links back to whether an offer might fundamentally appeal or not to a certain group of people. Price, and critical here really is the right price or the right pricing approach, which might be free, to meet the needs of your target audiences. I'm thinking here about all areas too. So absolutely this applies to sort of ticket costs, entry costs, but also across the cost of a whole trip, which might include catering, shop, car parking, etc., whatever it is that's relevant to your organisation. And in terms of promotion, that's talking about the online and the offline channels and methods to communicate opportunities to engage. And think here about what evidence you might need to inform your understanding of those tools as well. That might come from consultation and research, external or population data. The audience spectrum profiles contain information about the types of promotions and messages that might effectively reach all of those audience spectrum, each of those audience spectrum groups. So lots of information there. Also within the audience spectrum profiles, it actually covers sort of all 4 areas here. So it considers the type of product people might be attracted to, the type of pricing that might be required to reach that group, the type of experience that they might expect, as well as those communication tools and messaging as well. The 3 Cs of community engagement are focused on meaningful and sustainable interactions with communities and two-way communications or relationships. So under community involvement, you might be thinking about things like forums for decision-making and volunteering, for example. Under content, that might be looking at opportunities for creative or exploratory content, curatorial content, online content. So what is it? What content do you need to engage the people that you want to reach, and how can you work with them to ensure that that's right for the people you want to reach as an organization? And then co-creation. So active participation in devising, creating or curating cultural experiences. So working directly with communities to create those experiences. And I think what's really important here is just to really understand what you're already doing to involve people in decision-making, action, and creation, and what else you need or want to do. And again, just thinking back to your overall aims as an organization, your audience goals, really considering the role of each of those areas and what's relevant for your organization. What else might you need to be doing there? Just to very briefly just show you what the sort of action planning template might look like in terms of bringing all this together. This is just an example. Obviously, this could be adapted to meet your own needs. This is the type of framework we've often worked with in our work here. So thinking first of all about your audience goal and then setting out the strategies to achieve that goal, the objectives that are going to measure success, outlining the target groups, looking at the actions that need to take place to achieve that strategy, to put that strategy into place and deliver it, any timescales attached to that, and then the responsibility. So who's responsible for making that happen? So moving now to the review stage. And this is really important in terms of exploring whether you have achieved what you set out to do, understanding the extent to which you've achieved what you set out to do, where things have gone well, where things haven't gone well, and then really critically feeding that back into the audience development process to learn from that, and to make a positive change in the future on the back of that information. So it's about measuring progress towards your objectives, and that might be at the end of the audience development plan and throughout as you're delivering it, keeping a close check on how things are going. Just to say that the smarter your objectives, the easier this is. So where you've been quite specific in your objectives, it's easier to assess whether or not, or the extent to which you have met those. Think particularly about who you need to collect evaluative and review data for as well. That can really influence the approaches that you take to collecting that evidence. It'll undoubtedly be for internally, but think about what other funders, stakeholders need information from you, and think about what they might need from you, and what the right information is and how you might present that. And picking the right tools to measure success is really important here. So there's a kind of, you might be looking at surveys, ticketing systems, web analytics, digital surveys, and qualitative methods as well. And it all really depends on what your aim is, what your objectives are, but really kind of thinking about the right tools to enable you to measure accurately the success of what you've been doing. And then really quite importantly here, it's very easy to kind of collect this information and then do nothing with it. And putting aside the time and resource to regularly review and communicate findings to the rest of your organization is really important, to adjust what you're doing and to adapt in response to the findings. I'd like to finish with two short sections that just take us away from the planning cycle now. The first is a consideration of what it means to future-proof your audience development plan. I don't think we could have imagined the shocks and stresses of the last few years in quite the way that they've been and are currently happening. And being aware of the possibility of unexpected change perhaps never felt so important. So what we mean by future-proofing is, according to Wikipedia, future-proofing is the process of anticipating the future and developing methods of minimizing the effects of shocks and stresses of future events. Future-proofing is a substantial topic in its own right. And I only really have time to touch on it now. I think just to say that the key words in the dictionary definition here that jump out here around design and change. So just to read out the verb definition, if you future-proof something, you design or change it so that it will continue to be useful or successful in the future if the situation changes. So these ideas of design and change really encompasses the idea of building in flexibility to your plan, building in agility, and reviewing it regularly in response to the changing environments around you. The concept of double loop learning might be useful to consider. And this involves changing goals and actions in light of experience. So being genuinely dynamic and with a readiness to change in response to learning. So when we look at single loop learning, this makes inferences about another person's behaviour without checking whether they are valid. It may advocate an organisation's existing views without fully questioning, explaining or illustrating reasoning around that. It's quite a theoretical approach, but it's not really based in the experience of the organisation, the experience of audiences. And organisations can get stuck in repeated attempts at making the same approaches work without questioning if they're the right approaches and without questioning the goals. An example might be a theatre continuing to try and sell tickets for a type of show that has never sold well, for example. The emphasis might be on keep coming back, continuing to try and boost sales. But perhaps that depth of understanding about why that show doesn't sell within that community is missing, and more fundamental change might be needed. The double loop learning theory includes the views and experiences of participants. Theories should be made explicit and tested in this. Positions should then be reasoned and open to exploration by others. It's an experiential model. It's based on real experience and it's future effective as a result of that. And it moves the mental model on which decisions are made away from the mindset of what we've always done and questions fundamental approaches based on the experience. So it drives innovation and solutions which are genuinely fit for purpose. COVID has given us lots of examples of taking on board learning and experience to respond to unexpected situations. For example, organisations have turned approaches around and explored and discovered through experience and consultation how they can effectively engage audiences online as well as in person in the longer term. Another example of this concept in practice, particularly, is the Peterborough Presents Creative People and Places project. So we've worked on the project over a number of years, evaluating it. So to begin with, the project looked really successful. There were lots of people attending events, high ratings, but on examining the data more closely, it showed that they were not engaging with those low engaged people that Creative People and Places projects are supposed to. So the project really turned things around, and whilst the overall Creative People and Places and Peterborough Presents aims remain the same, they changed their strategy substantially. They focused in on hyperlocal work, for example, directly working in communities, and also developed a community commissioning scheme that went beyond the big public events to take commissions out into local areas. So there's a little bit more on our website there. You might like to read that, and the case in point link at the bottom of the slide there. I spoke earlier about the importance of bringing the whole organisation on board, and this is really fundamental to ensuring that your audience development plan is fit for purpose, and that it considers all areas of audience engagement and experience, as well as considers and takes on board the really valuable knowledge of staff across your organisation. And importantly as well, that there is a commitment to delivery of your plan across your organisation. So how do you go about bringing your whole organisation on board with the audience development planning process? Well, this is something we're asked to do quite a bit, actually, as in our consultancy work at the audience agency. So we've got some kind of insights here about the things that we've found in particular really work through that process. So the first one is that involvement is key, and consultation at all stages of the process, from conversations about your overall purpose as an organisation and setting audience goals, right through to sharing and discussing findings from your review process. And genuinely listening and taking on board what people say. And if you can't take someone's suggestion on board, tell them why. Don't sort of leave them thinking that it wasn't viewed as important, for example. So really open narrative there around suggestions and ideas. And then relate the planning process to individuals or teams' own work. So ask people for input, involve them in a proactive way in defining the implications for their own team, involve them in generating ideas about how their team contribute to achieving audience goals. And remember that teams don't experience change in the same way. And the diagram here sets out the variety of people and behaviours you might expect to deal with there. So think about where different teams and individuals within your organisation might sit on this matrix. How can you use the champions, for example, to bring others on board? How can you minimise the effect of the saboteurs and critics? Can you bring them on board through more direct involvement, for example, by framing things in a different way, or by bringing target audience groups to life? There are lots of different ways in which you can sort of help to bring those people back and help to get them on board with the process, but realise how important it is to the success of the organisation. And then just lastly, a useful tool to consider is RACI. And this is a framework that can be used for different elements of your plan to make it clear who has the overall responsibility for carrying out different areas, who's the ultimate decision maker, who has overall authority, who needs to be consulted, whose opinions do you need to consider, and who needs to be informed, so just sort of told in a less active way about what will happen or what to do next. That's all of my content now. I'm just a signpost. We've got a few pages here of links to resources that you might find helpful. So around audience development, understanding population opportunities, digital, around segmentation, sector opportunities, community consultation, around how some of the ways in which we can help in terms of putting audiences at the centre of your planning, our bespoke audience development planning support, and embedding developments across your organisation. This is our website address here as well, and please do drop us an email if there's anything that we can answer or help with.